The war did not start with a battle. It started with silence. One day, the ships stopped coming. No cargo haulers from the Mars colonies. No signals from the deep space relay stations near Jupiter. No answers from the 3 human outposts near the edge of known space. Earth scientists checked their instruments again and again, thinking it was a mistake. It was not a mistake. Something big had moved into position around the solar system, and it had cut humanity off from everything beyond its own front door. It took 11 days for Earth to understand what had happened. A single automated probe, half destroyed and drifting, made it back to Earth orbit. Its recordings showed massive alien ships, larger than any human city, forming a wall of steel and energy around the edge of the solar system. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Nobody could count for certain because the sensors kept failing under the strange energy field the ships gave off. The aliens called themselves the Thren Dominion, though humans would only learn that name weeks later. The Dominion was old. It had existed for over 10,000 years, conquering world after world, absorbing every species it found weaker than itself. It had never lost a war. It had never even fought a war that lasted more than a few months. To the Dominion, humanity was nothing more than another young, loud species that had made too much noise reaching for the stars. They did not attack. They did not need to. They simply surrounded the solar system and waited, the way a spider waits at the edge of its web. The blockade was total. No ship could leave. No signal could get out undetected. Earth's own satellites in low orbit were left alone, as if the Dominion wanted humanity to see them constantly, to feel their presence every single day, staring down from the sky, like judges who had already decided the sentence but had not yet spoken it aloud. General Elena Cho stood in the underground command center beneath what used to be Geneva, watching the live feed from Earth's remaining orbital telescopes. The image showed 3 Dominion warships, each one larger than Manhattan Island, holding position just past the orbit of the moon. They had been there for 6 months now. 6 months of silence, of waiting, of not knowing why they had not simply destroyed humanity already. "They could kill us any time they want," said Dr. Aidan Okafor, the head of Earth's Combined Science Council, standing beside her. "So why don't they?" "Because they don't need to hurry," Elena answered. "To something that has lived 10,000 years, 6 months is nothing. They're not afraid of us escaping. They're just waiting for something." Nobody knew what that something was. Some believed the Dominion was waiting for humanity to destroy itself through panic and infighting, the way conquered species had come apart before other invasions in Dominion history. Others believed the Dominion was studying humanity, gathering data before deciding exactly how to use them, whether as slaves, soldiers, or something else entirely. The scientists who studied the intercepted Dominion transmissions, garbled and incomplete, found one word that repeated often. Translated roughly, it meant harvest. That word changed everything. Earth's governments, which had spent decades arguing over borders and resources, suddenly found a reason to work together. The United Earth Defense Council was formed within a month, combining the militaries, scientists, and industries of every nation into a single command structure. It was messy, it was slow, but it worked, because for the first time in human history, every person on the planet understood that there was no us versus them anymore among humans. There was only humanity versus the wall of ships in the sky. Elena Cho had been a fighter pilot once, decades ago, before rising through the ranks to become the highest military authority on the planet. She was 61 years old, with gray hair cut short, and a face that had learned not to show fear even when she felt it. She had lost her brother in the early panic riots that followed the blockade announcement, when people had tried to flee cities in the mistaken belief that the aliens were about to strike. She carried that loss quietly, using it as fuel rather than letting it break her. Beside her, Dr. Okafor represented something different. He was not a soldier, he was a physicist, one of the leading minds behind Earth's fusion drive research before the blockade began. He was younger than Elena, in his mid-40s, with the restless energy of a man who solved problems by staying awake for days at a time. His team had been working on something before the blockade started, something theoretical that most scientists had dismissed as science fiction. Now, with humanity trapped and desperate, that theory was the only hope anyone had. "Tell me again," Elena said, turning away from the screen. "Tell me you can actually build this thing." Aidan rubbed his eyes. He had not slept properly in 3 days. The math works. I've checked it 100 times. 100 times more than that, my team has checked it. The problem was never the theory. The problem was always the power requirement. We needed something that could generate and control an amount of energy no human reactor could produce. And now? Now we have 6 Dominion drone wrecks sitting in a hangar in Nevada, shot down by our own ground defenses when they got too curious. Their power cores are unlike anything we've built. If we can reverse engineer even one of them and combine it with our own drive theory, we might be able to build something that can do what no human ship has ever done. Which is, Aiden looked at her directly, punch a hole through space. Not travel through it slowly, like our current ships. Fold the distance between 2 points and step through, instantly, or close enough to instant that it won't matter. We call it the thread drive. Elena had heard the pitch before, in shorter versions, in reports she had barely had time to read. Hearing it spoken plainly, in this room, with the weight of humanity's survival behind it, made it feel different, bigger, more dangerous. If this works, she said slowly, what can it actually do for us? We can't fight our way out of a blockade held by thousands of warships, with 3 fusion-powered prototypes. No, Aiden agreed. We can't win a war of ships, not yet. Maybe not for 100 years. But the thread drive doesn't need to fight a war. It needs to go somewhere they don't expect us to go, somewhere so close to them, so deep inside their own territory, that they can't believe we made it there at all. Elena felt a chill run down her spine, not from fear, but from the shape of an idea beginning to form. You're not talking about escape, she said. You're talking about a message. I'm talking about survival, Aiden said. The Dominion is watching us, because they think we're helpless. Every day they wait, they grow more certain that we'll either die quietly or beg to be absorbed like every species before us. But what if, instead, we showed them that we are not what they think we are? What if the first thing they learn about humanity is not our fear, but our will? The room was quiet for a long moment. On the screen, the 3 Dominion warships continued their silent patrol at the edge of the moon's orbit, unaware that beneath the surface of the blockaded planet, a plan was beginning to take shape that would change the course of the war before it had even truly begun. Over the following months, the project consumed everything Earth had left to give. Factories that once built cars and airplanes were converted to produce components for what was now called Project Threadneedle. Scientists from a dozen countries who had once been rivals worked side by side, sharing notes in broken English and translated documents, driven by the shared understanding that failure meant extinction. Soldiers guarded the construction sites not just from external threats, since the Dominion showed no sign of noticing the activity on the ground, but from the growing unrest among a population that did not know what was being built or why. Elena took personal responsibility for choosing the crew. The thread drive, once built, could only carry a small vessel, nothing like the massive warships humanity dreamed of building one day. It would need a pilot skilled enough to fly through conditions no simulator could fully prepare for, and a small support crew capable of handling whatever they found on the other side of the jump, if they survived it at all. She chose Captain Marcus Reyes to lead the mission. He was 34 years old, a former test pilot who had flown Earth's fastest experimental aircraft before the blockade grounded every flight above a certain altitude. He had lost his wife during the panic riots, the same week Elena lost her brother, though the two of them had never spoken about it directly. He volunteered the moment he heard rumors of the project, before he even knew the details, because he no longer had much left to lose and everything left to prove. You understand this might be one way, Elena told him during his final briefing, 3 weeks before the planned launch. Even if the thread drive works exactly as designed, we don't know what's on the other side. We don't know if you'll be able to come back. Marcus did not flinch. Then I'll make sure it counts, he said. One way or the other. The ship itself was small, barely large enough for a crew of 4, built inside a Nevada mountain, and shielded from Dominion sensors by layers of rock, and by the same jamming technology the Dominion itself had accidentally taught Earth's engineers through the wreckage of their downed drones. It had no name yet, only a designation, TN-1, for Threadneedle 1. It would carry no weapons capable of fighting a war. It carried something else instead, something Aiden Okafor had insisted on from the very beginning of the project. If we only send a weapon, he told Elena during one of their final planning sessions, and it fails, we've told them exactly how dangerous we could become, and given them every reason to end us quickly. But if we send something else, something they don't expect at all, we might buy ourselves time. Time to grow. Time to build a real future. Elena had asked what he meant by something else. Aiden had smiled, tired but certain, and told her the truth. The ship would carry a message, recorded in every human language they could manage, meant to be broadcast the instant the thread drive opened its gate. Not a threat, not a surrender. A simple, unshakable statement, meant to be heard by an empire that had never once, in 10,000 years, been surprised by anyone it had chosen to conquer. 6 months after the blockade began, with the Dominion still patrolling silently at the edge of the moon, the final tests of the thread drive were completed in the hidden Nevada facility. The math was checked one final time. The power core, built from the reverse-engineered wreckage of a Dominion drone, hummed steadily in its housing, waiting. Marcus Reyes stood in front of his small crew for the last time before launch, looking at the faces of the 3 people who had trained beside him for months. Behind them, Elena and Aiden watched from the control room, neither one willing to say aloud what they were both thinking, that this single, small ship, built in secret, beneath a mountain, by a species the galaxy had already written off, might be the only chance humanity had left. Whatever happens out there, Marcus said to his crew, they're about to learn something about us, something they never bothered to check before they put up that wall in the sky. Above them, unseen and unaware, the Dominion's warships continued their patrol, confident in 10,000 years of unbroken victory. They did not know that far below the surface of the blockaded planet, a door was about to open that would lead not to Earth's surrender, but straight into the heart of their own capital. The Dominion capital was called Threnor Prime, a world so old that its cities had been rebuilt 1,000 times over 10,000 years, each layer of construction stacked upon the ruins of the last, like rings inside a tree. It was the beating heart of an empire that stretched across more than 600 star systems, home to the Dominion's ruling council, its greatest shipyards, and its oldest and most powerful families. High above the golden spires of the capital, in a chamber built entirely of dark crystal, harvested from a dead star, sat the Dominion's ruling council. 9 members, each one representing a different branch of the ancient empire, gathered to discuss matters that would decide the fate of entire worlds. Today, one small item remained on their agenda, almost an afterthought compared to the larger business of the empire, the blockade of a minor, newly discovered species called humanity. The primitives show no signs of the usual patterns, said Council Elder Vesic, an old and heavily armored member of the Thren warrior caste, his voice deep and slow, with the confidence of a being who had personally overseen the conquest of 30 different worlds. No infighting, no collapse, no surrender messages. It has been 6 of their months, and they remain stubbornly organized. Curious, but not concerning, replied Council Elder Thassa, whose role was to oversee matters of intelligence and observation across the empire. She was smaller than Vesic, sleek and quick in her movements, with eyes that missed nothing. Every species reacts differently to first contact with the blockade. Some panic within days. Others take years to break. The humans are simply slower than most. It changes nothing about the outcome. And what of the strange energy readings from their third planet? Asked a third voice, belonging to Council Elder Gren, the youngest member of the council, and the one most often ignored by the others. My scouts detected unusual power signatures beneath the surface, months ago. I raised this concern before, and it was dismissed. Vesic waved a heavy hand, the gesture carrying centuries of dismissiveness behind it. Primitive species often panic and build useless defenses when they feel cornered. It means nothing. They lack the technology to threaten even a single scout ship, let alone the blockade fleet. Focus your scouts on matters that actually concern the Empire, young one. Gren said nothing further, though the doubt did not leave his mind. He had studied humanity's records more closely than most of the Council, fascinated by a species that had gone from primitive flight to space travel in less than 2 centuries, faster than almost any species the Dominion had ever recorded. Something about their speed of growth troubled him, though he could not yet put it into words the rest of the Council would respect. The Council moved on to other matters, larger conquests, older wars, disputes between noble Thren families that had lasted for centuries. The blockade of Earth remained a minor item on a very long list, exactly as the Dominion had intended it to be. To them, humanity was simply another young species waiting to be harvested when the time was right. Its fate already decided the moment the blockade fleet arrived. No council member imagined that anything happening on that small, distant, blockaded planet could possibly matter to the future of their ancient empire. Back on Earth, 6 months of work had turned into 8. The thread drive test that had originally been planned for a simple, short-range jump inside the solar system had been delayed twice, first by a catastrophic containment failure that destroyed an early prototype and killed 2 engineers, and second, by a supply shortage of a rare material needed to stabilize the drive's core, which had to be secretly mined from deep beneath the Earth's crust, using old geological survey data. Marcus Reyes spent those extra months training harder than he ever had in his life. The simulators built to prepare him for the thread drive jump were crude, based on incomplete theory and guesswork, since no human had ever experienced what he was about to attempt. Aiden Okafor personally walked him through the physics again and again, trying to prepare him for sensations no words could fully describe. The drive doesn't move the ship through space the normal way, Aiden explained during one of their late-night sessions in the underground facility. It folds space itself, bringing 2 distant points close together for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the ship to cross the gap. During that fraction of a second, from your perspective, inside the ship, everything might feel wrong. Time might feel stretched or compressed. Your body might feel like it's being pulled in directions that don't exist. We don't fully know, because no living thing has ever survived the process to describe it. No living thing, Marcus repeated. You tested it on something, though. Aiden hesitated before answering. We tested it on isolated tissue samples, kept alive artificially. They survived the jump. That's the best data we have. Marcus absorbed this in silence for a moment. Then he nodded, the same way he always did when facing something dangerous. Then I guess I'll be the first. The crew Marcus led into the mission had been chosen just as carefully as he had. Lieutenant Sarah Kim served as the ship's pilot, second in command, a former commercial spaceplane pilot with a reputation for staying calm during emergencies that would have panicked most people. She had lost her entire family in a Dominion probe strike early in the blockade, when an automated scanning drone had misjudged a research outpost as a threat and destroyed it instantly, killing everyone inside. She carried her grief the way a soldier carries a weapon, always present, never displayed unless needed. Specialist David Park served as the ship's engineer, responsible for keeping the thread drive and its stolen alien power core functioning throughout the mission. He was the only member of the crew who had actually worked hands-on with the recovered Dominion drone wreckage, having spent years before the blockade studying advanced propulsion systems. He understood the alien technology better than almost anyone alive, though even he admitted there was much about it he did not fully understand. The 4th member of the crew was Dr. Naomi Whitfield, a linguist and cultural analyst whose job was not to fight or fly the ship, but to understand whatever they found on the other side of the jump. She had spent the past 8 months studying every fragment of intercepted Dominion communication Earth scientists had managed to translate, building a working understanding of their language, their culture, and their history. She was the quietest member of the crew, but Elena Cho considered her mission just as critical as Marcus's piloting skills. A ship that appeared inside enemy territory, without anyone able to understand or communicate with what they found, would accomplish nothing. We are not going there to fight, Naomi reminded the crew often, during their long training sessions together. We are going there to be understood. If they only see us as a weapon, they will destroy us and never think about it again. But if they see us as something else, something they cannot easily explain away, we might actually change how this war unfolds. As the 8th month of the blockade came to a close, Project Threadneedle reached its final stage. The thread drive, rebuilt after the earlier containment failure, passed its first successful short-range test, folding space across a distance of nearly 10,000 kilometers in less than a second. The ship used for the test, an unmanned drone version of the design, arrived at its destination intact, its instruments recording data that confirmed Aiden's years of theoretical work. The success sparked a mixture of celebration and fear throughout the underground facility. Celebration, because it proved the technology worked. Fear, because it meant the next step could no longer be delayed. The full mission, sending TN-1 with its human crew across the vast distance to the very heart of Dominion territory, was now ready to proceed. Elena Cho gathered the full command staff for one final review, before authorizing the launch. The plan itself had grown more ambitious over the months of preparation. It was no longer simply about sending a message and hoping to survive. Aiden's team, working with intelligence gathered from the captured Dominion drones, had identified something important buried within the wreckage's navigation logs. Coordinates. Not just any coordinates, but a partial star map, damaged and incomplete, that appeared to include a location marked with unusually high priority within Dominion systems. Cross-referencing the data, with everything Earth scientists had learned about Dominion communication patterns, they had come to a stunning conclusion. "We believe this location is Threnar Prime," Aiden explained to the assembled command staff, showing a reconstructed star map on the main screen. "The Dominion capital itself. If we're right, and if the thread drive can hold together across a jump of this distance, TN1 won't just escape the blockade. It will arrive inside the most heavily defended, most sacred territory the entire Dominion Empire possesses." The room fell silent. Someone finally spoke, voice tight with disbelief. "You want to send 4 people, alone, unarmed, for real combat, directly into the capital of an empire that has never lost a war in 10,000 years? "I want to send 4 people who understand exactly what they're risking," Aiden replied. "To do something no one in that empire's 10,000-year history has ever imagined a young, blockaded species would dare to attempt. We're not trying to win a war with 4 people and 1 small ship. We're trying to make them understand something about us that they cannot currently see from behind their wall of warships." Elena studied the star map for a long moment before speaking. "Marcus," she said finally, turning to the pilot who would carry humanity's first true strike into the heart of an alien empire. "This is your call as much as mine. The math says the jump might work. It also might kill all 4 of you the instant you attempt it, or drop you into the sky, above a planet defended by more firepower than our entire species has ever built. I need to know you and your crew understand exactly what you're choosing." Marcus looked around at his crew, Sarah, David, and Naomi, each one meeting his gaze without hesitation. He turned back to Elena. "We understood that the day we volunteered," he said. "Every day this blockade continues. More of our people lose hope. We've seen the riots. We've seen the fear spreading through cities that used to fight over borders, and now can't even agree on how to survive together. If there's a chance, even a small one, to show humanity that we can reach further than they think we can, then it's worth taking." Elena nodded slowly, the decision settling over her like a weight she had carried for months, finally ready to be set down. "Then prepare for launch," she said. 3 days from now, at 0400 hours, TN1 goes." 3 days later, in the pre-dawn darkness above the Nevada desert, deep beneath the mountain that had hidden humanity's last, best hope, for 8 long months, the final systems of the thread drive came online. Marcus Reyes sat in the pilot's seat, Sarah beside him at the co-pilot controls, David monitoring the power core's readings from the engineering station behind them, and Naomi reviewing her translated recordings one final time. Above the surface, unseen and unaware, 3 Dominion warships continued their eternal patrol at the edge of the moon's orbit, their sensors detecting nothing unusual, their confidence in 10,000 years of unbroken conquest, as absolute as it had ever been. In the control room, Elena Cho watched the countdown reach its final seconds, Aiden Okafor standing silently beside her, both of them holding their breath as the last number ticked away, and the thread drive, built from human desperation and stolen alien technology, tore open a hole in space itself. The jump did not feel like falling. It did not feel like flying either. Marcus Reyes would later struggle to describe it to anyone who asked, because there were no words in any human language built to describe what it felt like when the universe folded around a person for the span of a single heartbeat. For one impossible instant, the cockpit of TN1 seemed to stretch in every direction at once, colors bending into shapes that had no names, sound arriving before it should have been possible to hear it. Marcus felt his own thoughts pull apart and come back together faster than he could track them. Beside him, Sarah Kim gripped the edge of her seat so hard her knuckles turned white, her eyes wide open but unfocused, staring at something that was not quite there, and not quite not there. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The ship lurched hard, systems screaming warnings across every display, and Marcus's training took over before his mind had even finished catching up. He grabbed the controls, stabilizing the ship's spin, forcing his focus onto the readouts in front of him, instead of the lingering disorientation still echoing through his skull. "Report," he said, his voice rough. "Everyone, report." "I'm here," Sarah managed, blinking hard. "I'm okay. Systems are answering me." "Engineering's fine," David called from behind them, though his voice carried the same shaken edge as everyone else's. "Power core is stable. Drive components look intact. No visible damage. I don't believe it. It actually held together." "Naomi?" Marcus asked. "I'm here," she answered quietly. "Marcus, look outside." He looked. The viewport ahead of them, which moments before had shown the dark, empty patrol lanes near Earth's moon, now showed something else entirely. A massive planet filled nearly the entire window, its surface a strange golden-brown color, covered in enormous cities that glowed even from high orbit, connected by threads of light that stretched between them, like a web woven across the entire visible hemisphere. Around the planet, hundreds, maybe thousands of ships moved in slow, orderly patterns. More vessels than Marcus had ever seen in one place in his entire life, more than humanity's entire combined fleet could ever hope to match. They had made it. The thread drive had worked exactly as Aiden Okafor promised it would, folding the vast distance between Earth's solar system and the very heart of the Dominion Empire into a single, impossible jump. TN-1 now hung in orbit above Threnar Prime itself, the capital world of an empire that had never lost a war in 10,000 years, and it had arrived completely unannounced. "David," Marcus said, forcing calm into his voice, despite the wild pounding of his own heart. "How are we reading on their sensors right now?" David's hands flew across his console. "I'm picking up scanning activity, but it's slow, methodical. I don't think they've locked onto us yet. Our stealth systems are holding, at least for now, but we're broadcasting a lot of strange energy from the drive core cooling down. That's not going to stay hidden for long." "Then we don't have long," Marcus said. He turned to Naomi. "This is it. Are you ready?" Naomi took a breath, steadying herself, her hands moving over the small console that controlled the recorded broadcast they had carried across the entire galaxy. "I'm ready," she said. "The message is loaded, translated into their primary language, and 6 regional dialects, along with the original human languages beneath them. The moment we transmit, everyone from their lowest technician to their highest council member is going to hear exactly who we are." Marcus looked at his crew one final time, Sarah at the controls beside him, ready to fly the ship through whatever came next. David monitoring the systems that had somehow survived a jump no living being had ever attempted before. Naomi, holding in her hands the words meant to change how an ancient empire understood a species it had already decided to erase from its plans. "Send it," Marcus said. Naomi pressed the control. Across every frequency the Dominion used for planetary communication, a message began to broadcast from a tiny, unidentified vessel that had somehow appeared inside the most heavily defended airspace in the entire empire. Down on the surface of Threnar Prime, in the dark crystal chamber where the ruling council conducted its business, alarms began sounding for the first time in over 300 years. Council Elder Vesic, in the middle of discussing an unrelated matter concerning a distant border dispute, stopped mid-sentence as the chamber's massive display screens flickered and shifted, overridden by an incoming transmission that no Dominion security system had been able to block or trace. "What is this?" Vesic demanded, rising from his seat. "Explain this interruption immediately." An aide rushed forward, his hands shaking as he worked at his console. "Elder, we cannot identify the source. It is broadcasting from orbit, directly above the capital, on every channel simultaneously. Our defense grid shows no matching vessel signature. It is as if the ship simply appeared." "Appeared," Council Elder Thassa repeated, her sharp eyes narrowing. "From where?" Before anyone could answer, the broadcast itself began to play, filling the chamber with a voice that spoke first in the Dominion's own ancient tongue, calm and measured, carrying no trace of fear, despite the impossible situation it described. "People of the Dominion," the voice said, "we are humanity, a species you chose to blockade rather than speak to. 8 months ago, you surrounded our homeworld without explanation, without communication, and without any attempt to understand who we are. You assumed our silence meant weakness. You assumed our patience meant surrender. You were wrong on both counts. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the voice continued. "We did not come here to attack your capital. We did not come here to threaten your people. We came here because you left us no other way to be heard. Our species built this ship, and the technology that carried it across the distance between our home and yours, in less than 8 months, using only the wreckage you left behind when your scouting drones underestimated us and were destroyed by our simple ground defenses. We built it in secret, beneath a blockade you believed was absolute, using knowledge we should not have had time to develop. Imagine, then, what we might build given a decade. Imagine what we might build given a century." Council Elder Gren, the youngest member of the council, felt something cold settle in his chest as he listened. He had raised concerns about the strange energy readings from Earth months ago, concerns Vesic had dismissed without a second thought. He said nothing now, but his mind was already racing through the implications of what he was hearing. "We are not here to declare war," the voice continued. "We are here to declare that we exist, that we will not be quietly harvested like every species that came before us, and that any attempt to erase us will cost far more than your empire currently believes. We ask, instead, for something you have not yet offered us, the chance to be understood, before any further decisions are made about our fate." The message ended. Silence hung over the council chamber for a long, heavy moment before Vesic's voice broke through it, edged now with something the old warrior had not felt in centuries: uncertainty. "Locate that ship," he ordered, his voice sharp. "Locate it, and bring it down immediately. I do not care how they arrived. I care only that they leave this system as a lesson written across the sky, for every species watching." Alarms continued to sound throughout Threnor Prime's orbital defense network as ships began breaking formation, turning their sensors and weapons toward the small, unidentified vessel that had appeared, impossibly, in the very heart of their territory. Aboard TN-1, Marcus watched the readouts shift from calm, methodical scanning to something far more urgent. "They're mobilizing," David called out, his voice tight. "I'm reading at least a dozen warships changing course toward our position, and that number is climbing fast." "Time to go?" Sarah asked, her hands already moving toward the controls that would begin charging the thread drive for a return jump. Marcus glanced at Naomi, who was watching a separate display, one that monitored the chatter across Dominion communication channels her translation systems could pick up. Her expression had shifted from focused determination to something closer to fascination. "Wait," she said. "Marcus, look at this. It's not all fear and anger down there. There's confusion, yes, and there's certainly anger from their military command, but I'm also picking up something else. Some of their scientific and diplomatic channels are asking questions, real questions, about us, about how we did this. Some of them almost sound curious." Marcus weighed the moment carefully, feeling the pressure of a dozen approaching warships against the fragile opportunity Naomi had just described. "How much time do we have before those ships are in weapons range?" "At their current speed," David answered, "maybe 6 minutes." "Then we don't run yet," Marcus decided, surprising even himself with the certainty in his own voice. "We came here to be understood, not just to deliver a message and disappear. If there's a chance to actually reach someone down there, even a small one, we take it. Naomi, can you open a direct channel, something they can respond to instead of just receiving?" Naomi's fingers moved quickly across her console, opening now. On the surface, in the dark crystal council chamber, a new alert appeared on the display, different from the mass broadcast that had come before. This one was a direct, open channel, offered freely by the strange vessel above their capital, as if the humans aboard it were inviting a conversation, rather than simply delivering an ultimatum and fleeing. Council Elder Gren, before Vesic could order the channel destroyed or ignored, stepped forward. "Elder Vesic," he said, his voice carrying more confidence than it usually did in council sessions. "Before we destroy something we do not yet understand, perhaps we should first understand it. A species capable of what we just witnessed deserves at least a moment of our attention. Before we decide, it deserves only our anger." Vesic turned to the younger elder, his ancient eyes hard with the accumulated certainty of 10,000 years of unbroken Dominion victory. But behind that certainty, for the first time in longer than he could remember, there was a flicker of something else: doubt. Above the golden spires of Threnor Prime, surrounded by a rapidly closing wall of Dominion warships, The small human ship TN-1 waited, its open channel humming quietly, offering the ancient empire a choice it had never once, in 10,000 years of conquest, been forced to consider: the choice to listen. Council Elder Vesic did not want to open the channel. Every instinct built over centuries of conquest told him to destroy the small vessel and move on, to treat this strange event as a minor security failure, rather than something worth his personal attention. But Gren's words had planted a seed of doubt, and Thassa, watching the exchange with her usual sharp calculation, added her own voice before Vesic could refuse. "If we destroy them without understanding how they arrived here," Thassa said, "we lose the chance to learn how they broke through defenses that have never once failed us in 10,000 years. That knowledge alone may be worth more than the satisfaction of their destruction. We can always kill them later, once we understand what they did." Vesic's jaw tightened, but he gave a short, sharp nod. "Open it," he said, "but keep every weapon in this system trained on that ship. The moment I give the order, it dies." The channel opened. On the display, instead of a physical image, a simple audio connection crackled to life, carrying Naomi Whitfield's voice, calm and measured, despite the 6 warships now closing toward TN-1's position. "This is Dr. Naomi Whitfield, of the human vessel Threadneedle 1, she said, her words translated instantly by the same systems that had delivered the broadcast minutes earlier. "We thank you for opening this channel. We did not come here seeking violence." "You arrived inside our capital's most protected space," Vesic replied, his translated voice carrying barely restrained anger, "using technology our own scientists cannot explain, and you claim you did not come seeking violence. Explain yourselves, quickly, or explain nothing at all." Aboard TN-1, Marcus watched the countdown on David's console tick steadily downward, the approaching warships drawing closer with every passing second. He gave Naomi a small nod, trusting her to handle what came next. "8 months ago," Naomi said, "your empire surrounded our homeworld without warning, without explanation, and without any attempt at communication. You call this a blockade. We experienced it as a threat aimed at our entire species, one we did not understand, and were never given the chance to respond to. We built this ship, and the drive that carried it here, because silence and isolation left us no other way to be heard by the beings who had trapped us. Species are not owed an explanation when the Dominion determines their fate," Vesic snapped. "You are young. You are primitive by every measure that matters. The blockade exists because it always exists, for every species not yet ready to be absorbed properly into Dominion territory." "And what happens," Naomi asked, "to species that are absorbed?" The question hung in the silence of the council chamber for a moment longer than Vesic seemed comfortable with. It was Gren who answered, stepping closer to the communication console despite Vesic's obvious disapproval. "They are given a place within the Dominion," Gren said. "Their technology is studied and incorporated. Their people are reorganized according to their usefulness. It has been the pattern for 10,000 years. No species has ever resisted it successfully." "We understand that pattern differently," Naomi replied. "From what our scientists have translated of your own historical records, absorption often means the loss of independent culture, independent governance, and in many cases, independent thought. Species become resources rather than partners. We are not willing to accept that future without at least the chance to offer something different." Vesic's patience, thin from the start, finally broke. "You speak as though you have a choice in this matter. You are one small ship, alone, inside the heart of an empire, with thousands of warships at its command. Whatever clever trick brought you here will not save you from what happens next." "Perhaps not," Marcus said, speaking for the first time, his voice steady, despite everything happening around him. "But consider what you already know about us. We built a ship capable of folding space across an unimaginable distance in less than 8 months, starting from the wreckage of a single destroyed scout drone. We did this while completely isolated, completely blockaded, with no outside help and no advanced knowledge beyond what we could reverse engineer ourselves. Now imagine what a species like that becomes over the next 10 years, the next 100. You have spent 10,000 years conquering species that grew slowly and predictably. We are neither of those things." The council chamber fell silent again. Even Vesic, for all his anger, seemed to be turning the words over carefully in his mind. It was Thassa who spoke next, her voice calculating rather than emotional. "You are suggesting a threat, she said, "that destroying you now, or continuing the blockade, will only produce more of what we have already seen. More surprises, more unpredictable growth. We are suggesting a choice," Naomi corrected gently. "You can continue treating us as a threat to be contained, and eventually absorbed, and you may find that containment becomes increasingly difficult and increasingly costly over time. Or you can consider a different path, one where our species is allowed to develop independently, in exchange for peaceful relations rather than open hostility. Independence is not something the Dominion grants," Vesic said flatly. "It is not how the Empire has ever operated." "Then perhaps," Gren said quietly, surprising even himself with his own boldness, "it is something the Empire has never needed to consider before now." Vesic turned to the younger elder, old anger flaring in his eyes, but before he could respond, an alert flashed across the tactical display. One of the 6 approaching warships had entered weapons range of TN-1's position, its systems locking onto the small human vessel automatically, following standing defense protocols that required no direct order from the Council. "Elder," the ship's captain called through a separate channel, his voice tense. "We have weapons lock, awaiting your command." Every eye in the chamber turned to Vesic. Aboard TN-1, Marcus felt his own pulse quicken, as David's console blared a warning, the tactical display showing the closing warship's weapon systems fully charged and ready. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly, her hand hovering over the controls that would initiate an emergency jump, "say the word, and we're gone." Marcus hesitated, watching the open channel, watching the silent standoff between Vesic's obvious instinct to destroy them, and whatever doubt Gren and Thassa's words had managed to plant. He thought of Elena Cho, waiting back on Earth for news that might never come. He thought of the 8 months of sacrifice that had built this ship, this chance, this single fragile moment where an ancient empire was, for the first time in 10,000 years, actually considering a different path. "Not yet," he said quietly to Sarah. Then, louder, into the open channel. "Elder Vesic, if you destroy us now, you will have your answer about what humanity is capable of, but you will never learn what we might have become as something other than an enemy. That choice is yours to make, but know that we did not come here to threaten your empire's power. We came here because it was the only way left to ask for something as simple as being understood, before being judged." The chamber remained silent for a long, unbearable moment. Vesic's hand hovered over the console that would relay the order to fire, his ancient instincts warring visibly with the doubt that had crept into the room since the broadcast first began. It was Thassa who finally broke the silence, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had spent centuries weighing costs and benefits before every decision. "Elder Vesic," she said, "consider what destroying this ship actually accomplishes. We eliminate 1 small vessel and 4 individuals. We do not eliminate whatever remains on their home world, still blockaded, still capable of building more ships like this one, now with the added motivation of knowing we killed their envoys the moment they attempted peaceful contact. If our goal is truly to absorb this species eventually, killing them now guarantees only that any future absorption comes at a far higher cost." Vesic's hand remained motionless over the console. The seconds stretched painfully long, both aboard TN-1 and within the ancient council chamber below, as an empire that had never once hesitated in 10,000 years of conquest found itself, for the first time, genuinely uncertain about what to do next. Finally, Vesic lowered his hand. "Hold position," he said, the words clearly costing him something deep and old within his warrior's pride. "Do not fire. Not yet." Aboard TN-1, Marcus let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Beside him, Sarah's hand relaxed slightly on the jump controls, though she did not fully release them. Naomi's expression carried something close to cautious hope, while David continued monitoring the warships that still surrounded them, weapons still charged, still ready, even if not yet firing. "This changes nothing about the blockade," Vesic said through the open channel, his voice hardening again, even as the immediate threat of destruction passed. "Your homeworld remains contained. Nothing about your situation has improved beyond the fact that you are, for the moment, still alive." "For the moment," Naomi replied, "is more than we had 8 months ago. We are willing to discuss further, Elder Vesic, whenever the council is prepared to listen." Vesic did not respond immediately. Instead, the channel closed, leaving TN-1 surrounded by warships that no longer moved to attack, but did not withdraw either, hanging in a tense, uncertain standoff above the golden spires of Threnar Prime. In the council chamber, the 9 elders sat in a silence unlike any they had experienced in centuries, each one privately turning over the implications of what had just happened. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion had faced a species that refused to be simply conquered or dismissed, and had chosen, if only for this one uncertain moment, to hesitate rather than destroy. Gren watched the tactical display, where the small human vessel remained motionless amid the circle of Dominion warships, and felt something he had not expected to feel about a species he had only known for a matter of months: respect. Aboard TN-1, Marcus turned to his crew, all 4 of them alive, all 4 of them having just done something no human, and perhaps no species in the Dominion's 10,000-year history, had ever managed to accomplish. They had not won a war, they had not even secured a promise, but they had done something the ancient empire had never once been forced to do. They had made the Dominion listen. The standoff above Threnar Prime lasted 3 full days. TN-1 remained in orbit, surrounded by a rotating ring of Dominion warships, while below, the ruling council argued over what to do with a species they no longer fully understood. Marcus and his crew took shifts, sleeping in short bursts, never fully relaxing, always aware that a single order from Vesic could end everything in an instant. Naomi spent most of those 3 days in continuous contact with Gren, who had quietly become their strongest advocate within the council, exchanging information about human history, human culture, and the events that had led to the blockade in the first place. Gren, for his part, found himself fascinated by everything he learned. Humanity's history was short compared to the Dominion's 10,000 years, but it was dense with change, conflict, and rapid growth, in ways no species the Dominion had previously absorbed could match. Where other conquered species had often taken centuries to develop space travel after first achieving basic flight, humanity had done it in under 200 years, then followed it with fusion power, then with the reverse-engineered drive that had carried TN-1 across the galaxy in less than a single Dominion year. They are not simply young, Gren reported to the council on the 3rd day, standing before Vesic, Thassa, and the 6 other elders who had remained largely silent throughout the crisis. They are fast. Faster than any species in our recorded history. If we absorb them the way we have absorbed every other species, forcing their culture into our patterns and their industry into our service, I believe we will lose something valuable in the process. Perhaps something dangerous too, if that speed turns toward resentment instead of cooperation. Vesic listened, his ancient pride still bruised by 3 days of hesitation that went against everything 10,000 years of Dominion victory had taught him. But even he could not ignore the data now being compiled by Thassa's intelligence teams, data that showed a species capable of extraordinary adaptation under extreme pressure, a species that might indeed become either a valuable ally or a costly, unpredictable enemy, depending entirely on how the Dominion chose to proceed. "What are you proposing?" Vesic finally asked. Gren had clearly been waiting for the question. "A different kind of arrangement," he said. "Not absorption. Not conquest. A limited agreement, allowing humanity to remain independent, governing themselves, in exchange for open trade and shared knowledge. We lift the blockade, but we do not abandon observation. We treat them as we would treat a new and unusual neighbor, rather than a resource waiting to be claimed." The chamber erupted into quiet but intense discussion among the council members, some agreeing readily with Gren's proposal, others, particularly among the older warrior caste members allied with Vesic, resisting the idea of breaking 10,000 years of unbroken tradition for the sake of a single, small species. The debate stretched on for hours, long after Gren had finished speaking, each council member weighing the risks and benefits according to their own long experience and their own private fears. It was Thassa who finally tipped the balance. "Consider the cost of the alternative," she said, addressing the full council. "If we proceed with standard absorption, we commit resources to conquering a species that has already shown it can build weapons and technology capable of surprising us, even while completely isolated and outnumbered. If they resist during absorption, and everything we have learned suggests they will resist, the cost in ships, in lives, in resources, could easily exceed anything we have spent conquering a single species before. Gren's proposal costs us far less, and if humanity proves as valuable as their growth rate suggests, we gain a useful ally rather than an expensive, resentful subject. Vesic remained quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display that still showed TN-1 hanging in careful, patient orbit above the capital, its small crew of 4 having somehow forced an empire of 10,000 years to reconsider its most fundamental practices. Finally he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that would echo through Dominion history far longer than he could have imagined at the start of this crisis. "Open the channel," he said. "Let us hear what terms this species actually wants." Aboard TN-1, the crew received the request with a mixture of exhaustion and cautious hope. Naomi opened the channel once more, her voice steady despite 3 sleepless days of tension. "Elder Vesic," she said, "we are listening." The negotiation that followed took place over several more hours, conducted carefully between Naomi's translated words and the responses relayed from Elena Cho back on Earth, who had been receiving updates through a narrow, carefully hidden communication link David had managed to maintain, despite the Dominion's continued presence throughout the system. The terms that finally emerged were far from perfect and far from equal. The Dominion insisted on maintaining a reduced observation presence near the edge of the solar system, a smaller fleet than the original blockade, meant to monitor humanity's development rather than trap it entirely. Trade would be limited at first, carefully controlled, with the Dominion providing certain technologies in exchange for access to human innovations that had already proven surprisingly valuable, including insights from humanity's rapid, unconventional development of the thread drive itself. But the blockade, the total isolation that had trapped humanity for 8 long months, would end. Ships would be allowed to leave the solar system. Communication with the wider galaxy, however limited and monitored at first, would finally be possible. Humanity would remain independent, self-governing, free to continue building its own future, rather than being absorbed into a pattern that had swallowed every other species the Dominion had ever encountered. When the final terms were agreed upon, Elena Cho stood in the underground command center beneath Geneva, reading the translated agreement on her screen, with hands that trembled slightly, despite her decades of hardened military discipline. Beside her, Aiden Okafor allowed himself, for the first time in 8 months, a genuine smile. "They actually did it," he said quietly. "Marcus and the others. They actually did it." "They gave us a chance," Elena corrected gently. "Not a victory, not yet, but a chance, which is more than we had 8 months ago, and more than I believed possible when this whole thing started." TN-1 remained in Dominion orbit for one final day, completing the technical details of the agreement, before Vesic himself, still carrying the bruised pride of an elder who had broken 10,000 years of tradition, addressed the small human vessel one last time. "You have won something today that no species before you has ever managed," he said, his voice carrying grudging respect beneath its usual harsh authority. "Not through weapons, not through numbers, through a stubbornness that our histories have no precedent for. Do not mistake this agreement for friendship, humans. The Dominion does not forget that you forced our hand, and we will be watching your growth carefully, for both our benefit and our safety." "We understand," Marcus replied, "but we hope that watching, over time, might become something closer to working alongside one another, rather than simply watching for threats. That choice will be ours to make together, going forward." Vesic did not respond directly to that hope, but he did not dismiss it either, and Marcus chose to count that small silence as a kind of progress. Moments later, the channel closed for the final time, and TN-1 prepared for the long jump home, its thread drive powering up once more, for a journey that, months ago, no human had believed possible. The return jump felt different from the first. Where the outbound journey had carried the crushing weight of uncertainty, not knowing if the drive would even survive the attempt, the return carried something closer to exhausted relief. 4 people, who had accomplished something far larger than themselves, finally heading home, to the world that had sent them. When TN-1 emerged back into Earth's solar system, the blockade fleet that had surrounded the planet for 8 long months was already withdrawing, exactly as the agreement had promised, leaving behind only a smaller, distant observation presence near the edge of the system. Earth's own defense sensors, watching in disbelief, tracked the reduction in real time, broadcasting the news across the planet within minutes. The reaction on Earth was immediate and overwhelming. Cities that had spent 8 months gripped by fear and uncertainty erupted instead with celebration, though the celebration was tempered by the sobering knowledge, carefully explained by Elena Cho and the United Earth Defense Council, that this was not the end of humanity's challenges, but rather the beginning of a new and uncertain chapter. The Dominion remained watching, still powerful, still capable of changing its mind if humanity proved less valuable or more dangerous than Gren's arguments had suggested. But for the first time since the blockade began, humanity had a future to shape, rather than simply endure. Marcus Reyes, Sarah Kim, David Park, and Naomi Whitfield returned to Earth as heroes, though none of them felt entirely comfortable with the title. They had not fought a war, they had not destroyed an enemy fleet, or conquered new territory. They had done something quieter, and in some ways far more difficult. They had made an ancient, unbeatable empire pause long enough to actually consider who humanity truly was, rather than simply what humanity might become useful for. In the months that followed, as trade routes slowly opened and communication with the wider galaxy began, humanity found itself thrust into a much larger and more complicated universe than it had ever imagined, filled with other species, other empires, and other dangers, still waiting to be discovered. The Dominion remained a careful, watchful presence at the edge of human space, neither fully ally nor fully enemy, a relationship that would need to be built and rebuilt many times over in the years ahead. But on the day TN-1 returned, standing on the tarmac outside the Nevada facility that had hidden humanity's last, best hope for 8 desperate months, Elena Cho watched Marcus Reyes step out of the small ship that had carried humanity's future into the heart of an alien empire and back again. She thought of her brother, lost in the panic that followed the blockade's beginning, and of everyone who had given everything they had during those long, uncertain months to build a chance where none had seemed to exist. "Welcome home," she said simply, extending her hand. Marcus took it, exhausted but steady, the weight of everything his small crew had accomplished settling finally into something he could begin, slowly, to understand. "It's good to be back," he said, "but this isn't over. Not even close." "No," Elena agreed, looking up at the sky, where somewhere far beyond human sight, an ancient empire watched a young, stubborn species take its first real steps into a much larger galaxy. "It's only just beginning."